It is Friday, April 26th, 2024. We are headed into the weekend. I hope you have some great plans ahead of you. Last night was the NFL draft. Hopefully, your team got the player you're looking for. But as always, I'm focused on growth and marketing, and I have 4 articles for you to think about over the weekend. First up, Justin Rowe does the math on how to improve your LinkedIn presence. Ray Reich talks about what great reporting looks like for B2B SaaS companies and why it matters. Pep Laja says Wynter removed their self-service sign up and the effect on demos is not what you might have thought. And finally, Kyle Poyar talks about his tips for the first 90 days. So let's jump in. To get us started, I just want to go over this quickly, this post from Justin Rowe, because I think it's really valuable if you're trying to build out your LinkedIn presence. And he's got the qualifications to be able to talk about this: 75,000 plus followers, 4 million in earned revenue. And he says LinkedIn is a game. So he provides a scoring framework for you to understand which activities you should participate in to really build out your LinkedIn presence. And he starts off with high scoring content. He says you have to post content, period. But there's certain things. He says tactical how to video with long form text, 15 points. Carousels, short video clip making, 1 to 2 solid points, 13 points. And then he goes down here, and then some of the things that you see more on a more regular basis, which is low scoring content, which is just sharing your company blog post, sharing bland opinions likely shared by 90% of the audience, 3 points. So those are the things that don't really get much engagement. They're kind of boring, and they don't get many points in a scoring system. I think the big thing to focus on here is the real secret sauce of winning on LinkedIn isn't actually in the post, it's the engagement you give and receive, which is entirely what I've found in my experience with LinkedIn. The more I participate, the better the response is, the more my network grows. And so these are the things. He says send 15 targeted connection requests daily, which I don't do. It's something I'll take a look at based on this post. It's interesting. And so then he says make 10 to 20 meaningful comments on others' posts, 14 points, reply to all comments, like 10 to 20 posts on your home feed. So this engagement is really critical to improving your LinkedIn presence. But I think the thing out of this is you need to do these things, but it's a lot of work. It's not just something where you're like, oh, I'm just going to do this. It's investing in your own content, and it's, leading away with engagement. And so it works. I mean, I think Justin's a great example. It does work, but you have to put the work in. And so that's not something to overlook. But actually engaging, posting on a regular basis is critical. So take a look at Justin's article. He lays out this full scoring system. He even has some points that are negative, but being engaged in the community on LinkedIn is so important. Posting your content, but really being engaged is really the thing that's going to distinguish you on LinkedIn. So go ahead and be engaged. And if you want to, you can comment on this post or like it. It'll help with your. All right, let's take a look at this post from Ray Reich about B2B SaaS metrics. And so he starts off by saying, have you ever thought there must be a better way to use metrics? And I think the answer for most of us is going to be yes. Some companies we've worked with have a pretty good metrics foundation, but many struggle on this very topic. And so Ray says, Dave Kellogg and I discuss 5 root causes leading to 15 primary misuses of SaaS metrics. And so let's see what the 5 root causes are. I think this is really important for everyone to think about. The root causes are no shared metrics foundation. And so this is the idea that you don't have, that not everyone is operating from the same place in terms of metrics. They don't accept the definitions, they don't believe in the metrics. And so this foundation is not established within organizations. No trust in the metrics. So people are debating what the metrics mean or even if they're accurate. Metrics are not integral to the strategy. And so this needs to be like folded into your culture. And that's the next point. Cultures is not metric driven, and metrics are not being used to define business trajectory and long-term goals. And this is one of the interesting things out there. I don't know that everyone fully realizes how big an issue this is for many companies. These 5 things are something that many companies struggle with. And so it's one thing to propose, this is what you should do from a marketing perspective or growth perspective. But if you can't measure it, if you don't have this foundation, those things aren't really that meaningful because you don't know what you're going from, what's A to B. You don't know where you are now. You don't have the baseline established. You don't have a general agreement in terms of what you're trying to accomplish, and what you have accomplished if you put it in place. So that's why this is so important. And so he lays out these SaaS metrics maturity model, and a few of these really jumped out at me, which I think are critical. Semantics, defining what words like best case, commit, and downside mean. Documenting metrics and definitions and calculation. I mean, just so important. You have to document it so everyone can understand what the metrics mean and have like clear visibility into it instead of it just being verbal. And I think this one is actually really critical, and I don't see this mentioned. Consider establishing a metrics committee. And this is important because it's establishing the framework for metrics, but it's also understanding if you need to change metrics, give it a different look. How do you make those changes? Because this has an impact. And so a metrics committee gives you that governance. It gives you, so if you're going to change your metrics, then you take it to the metrics committee and say, this is why we need to change our metrics. It can't just be fluid. It has to be done in a very formal way. And then he moves down into these levels of maturity. Trust, which is obviously what you really want to get to. You want to make sure that there's no more discussion over what the metrics mean, that everyone believes in the metrics and will use them as part of their work. And then tying it to strategic efforts, share company strategic goals and what metrics measure the progress. And this is important when you're setting up your strategies. It's really important to start with your metrics to say, okay, we're going to do this. What impact do we think we're going to have with the metrics? What is a best case scenario? What are we hoping to achieve? You don't want to do that after the fact. You want to have this ingrained in what you're doing. And then he says you move on level 4, metrics culture, and then level 5 is trajectory. He says metrics are not momentary. They are a foundational component for a long term and are understood to be measurements that are highly correlated to target outcomes. So that's what we really want to get to, is that the idea that this is long term and there are measurements that are related to outcomes, that they're actually a fundamental piece of what we're trying to do. And that's why we're investing this much time in making sure our metrics are correct. So anyway, I think every company out there can use this messaging, can use these tips. So definitely take a look at this article. All right, let's take a look at this article from Peep Laja, who's CEO at Wynter. And he does something I think we would all like, or Wynter does something that we'd all like to try, which is we ran an experiment at Wynter. We turned off all self sign up, leaving only get a demo. Hypothesis: since sales converts folks better than self sign up, we'll get more demos and thus convert more customers. And so this is something that we've had discussions with on many times, is if we force more people into a demo, we'll actually increase the number of customers we get. He says the outcome, though, was the number of demos dropped. And he says why? It's impossible to know. It's not because demo only signals enterprise pricing only. Our pricing is transparent on our website. Some hypotheses. Nobody has bought a tool like Wynter before, and thus there's an increased need to feel like they could play around with it first. No choice comparison. Most people scheduling a demo are actually not signing up first. So it's not that, but forcing them to make a choice is better than yes, no. So 2 interesting hypotheses. I think it's interesting on this perspective is you really need to make sure that whatever your self-service sign-up process is excellent. If it's not great, if it's not putting your best foot forward, then it's worth testing this. I mean, I think it's worth testing this period and to see what the results are. In terms of this, I mean, I'm glad that he shared this and shared this real world experience that the demos dropped. I would just really like to see the data, like what's the time frame, what the actual data showed when they did this, so everyone can understand how they ran this experiment and what the actual impact was. It's great to share the example, but I think in terms of getting to a place where others want to try to replicate this example, having the specific methodology to recreate it, and then the data is absolutely critical. So anyway, very interesting topic, something I think that many of us have discussed before. It's interesting that we have one data point here that it did not work effectively. So it'll be interesting to test this out and see how it affects your organization. All right, let's take a look at this post from Kyle Poyar. He's always got something interesting to say. And he starts off by saying, "This week I interviewed 20 operators about quick wins, small changes to make an impact on your first 90 days." He says what he left out was his quick wins. And I'm not going to go through all these, but some of them are, I think, are really worth trying out. Again, there's no data here, so this is kind of just a brain dump from Kyle. But I do think there are some good points here and something worth considering. And some of these are just no brainers. Cancel the auto renewals. And so if you want to save some money, this makes a ton of sense. Obviously we work with many different clients, and when we go into these clients, all the time there's just software they're purchasing that's not being used anymore that they're continuing to pay for. So this is an easy way to save money. It won't have any impact on your business. It'll just save you money. So cancel the auto renewals and really review what software you're signed up for and make sure it's still needed. So that's a really easy win. Test an interactive demo. And so I put a comment on here that Wynter says up to 82% of people try an interactive demo before they sign up. And my point was, I don't see that many interactive demos, but I think this is a key engagement point and something worth trying out. And so he says there are new product categories that quickly become hygiene factors because they're just better. Interactive demos fall into this category for me. I bet 50% of software companies still don't have one. And so that's my feeling too, that under 50% of companies do not do an interactive demo. But because people in that Wynter survey said, "Hey, I use interactive demos," it makes me think that people do want to use the interactive demo. So definitely something worth trying out. And then he says, move from a hard gate to a soft gate. And he says sometimes there's things within your plan limitations that are hard gates, which can reduce the number of people who want to sign up. And he says, I find that plan limitations like user seats are hard gates that require explicit admin approval to exceed. My preference, shifting one or two of these to soft gates, let users invite others for free, and then true up later. He says Figma does this brilliantly. And so it's a good, you want to make sure you're eliminating things that are keeping people from signing up that you may not think it's that big a deal from the outside, but it's worth, especially since he's talking about people in their first 90 days, getting a fresh perspective on this. And then he says, run a patient zero analysis. We tend to study why we lost a deal or customer. We don't look at how our best customers got to where they are today. I'll take the top 20 accounts who expanded the most and revisit their exact journey from day one. Usually uncovers the surprising insights. So definitely worth doing. Don't just look at why you're losing deals, but figure out why your best customers became your best customers. And then finally, he says, ditch signups as a marketing KPI. Better activated signups, even better expected LTV based on firmographics and product usage. So I think this is just in general, moving away from less meaningful metrics that are kind of vanity metrics. It could be visitors to your website. It could be just leads and then signups in this case. So moving away from things that are less meaningful to more meaningful will have benefits for your organization. All right, that's it for today. I hope you found these articles interesting and could potentially have an impact on your business. Hope you have a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday.